Hello, everybody. Welcome to this week's episode of Step into the Pivot. I am super excited to have a new friend, Dr. Jessica Taylor, to tell her story to us today. She's passionate. I'm going to read just a little bit of her bio that really stuck out to me. And it's one of the sentences that you can read online. But within a lifetime of perspective as a biracial woman of color, years of executive experience, and a background in human development, Jessica coaches executive leaders and guides organizations through equitable leadership strategies, through nuanced and comprehensive methods. So that just really spoke to me. And Jessica, we're so happy to have you here with us today.
It's my privilege. Thank you.
Awesome. Ivana, it's all yours.
Yes. It's so a privilege right here. Welcome to the show, Jessica. And Teresa said, nuanced and comprehensive from your bio. This is what my experience with you so far has been. Every time we talk, there is, such depth to what you share and such nuance, and it's comprehensive, and you can also pack a punch, right? In this like punch of love. So you, in a few sentences, can really help a person completely shift perspective and connect the dots and really bridge, different realms. And I so appreciate that about you. I know that you've been through a lot in life, well, I don't, oftentimes we play with this metaphor here on the show of, bag of lemons, because, the metaphor of like, oh, when life gives you lemons, you make lemonade or you make a margarita is sometimes a joke, right? But we say what happens when a life, throws you a massive 40-pound bag of lemons and straight into like your head or your solar plexus, and it buckles you over. And it seems to me the way you started, the way this life started for you was like you were thrown into the bag of lemons, and then the bag of lemons was thrown around. And it's just, let's get in there. Please tell us about your early life, and the resilience that, was required of you right from the get-go.
Thank you for the question. So I've been thinking about, where it doesn't just start where it starts. There's kind of a space in your story where you realize that it starts. And so as I reflect on my story, there was this really powerful memory that I have of being on the bus. And I was about 6 years old. And there was just relentless bullying that happened on the bus at all times. It was just unsupervised children. Not always a great idea. And one day, one of the particular bullies who just really wanted to get a rise out of me, he yells at me the N-word. And I am 6. I don't know what that word means. And I can tell from the intonation, from his body, from the reaction, that this word is really bad, that this word is really charged. And it basically means you are disgusting, you don't belong. And so I feel like I know what it means, but I've never heard it. And so from that sense of separation, even just from my peers, I come home and I end up telling my parents, and I have this really defining conversation with my mother, because I am the only Black person in my family. And it wasn't until that moment that I realized that maybe there was something wrong with that. And so in that defining conversation with my mother, she talked to me about my conception, how she was in this unhealthy marriage, and that was really marked by substance abuse. And she had already chosen to terminate 2 pregnancies and said, I'm really not ready to be a mother. And then after all of that, she had this non-consensual encounter with a man that wasn't her husband, and then realized that she was pregnant, and she was pregnant with me. And so despite these obvious challenges that she was going to face in that space, she felt compelled to bring me into the world and to raise me herself. And so even though I didn't feel it then, now, beyond a shadow of a doubt, I believe that I've always been divinely protected and set apart for a higher purpose. But growing up as the only Black person in my family, I was just keenly aware of the contrast around me, right? I was placed in this family where you're supposed to feel belonging. And then this contrast made me feel like I'm part of something, but I'm apart from it, right? I'm an outsider who happened to be inside. And then that experience gave me this deep empathy for other people who felt disconnected or out of place. And it instilled in me a real passion, I think, for creating a space where people could feel seen and to have those conversations but also to feel valued in all of their complexity.
What a massive experience, just right from the get-go, from the micro experience of the bus story to then the conversation with your mom to then what you're talking about already, kind of like raising the vibe and taking us into a place of, where you really operate today, which is equitable leadership, not only living it, but keeping it and becoming a voice for inclusivity. You're also already demonstrating. I'm curious, some things just came up as a side note question. Who would you say was out there when you were, or in there, in the family space, or maybe somewhere adjacent to it, that as you were growing up, you did have some kind of role modeling of where you are today? Was there anybody where you were like, interesting, I like this, or this is helpful?
Yeah. So around 11 years old, I met a basketball coach. I did not want to play basketball, but I was forced to play basketball. And so she was a tough Black woman, but she also had a compassionate softness to her as well, that I knew she wanted us to succeed as a team. And so I really, she was one of my very first Black role models, where she didn't say a whole lot, but she showed with her action that she saw potential in me. And so I was not a natural athlete. I was naturally very competitive, but not very good. And actually, at the end of every year, she would give me the most improved award. And that actually was a beautiful gift because it was recognizing my growth over my performance, which was something I deeply needed to know. Her belief in me kind of planted a seed, helping me understand that my worth wasn't just about what I did, but about my growth and resilience. And so I knew, hey, I'm not going to be the MVP, but if I can be the most improved player, that's still winning, but winning at growth, not just being the best or the most competitive. And so I think that instilled something in me, seeing her leadership with strength and competitiveness, but also with that softness to recognize the growth.
Yeah, I love that. That really spoke to me, right? Because we're not always the top player or the top person, but it's about trying and doing your best and all that. So I really love that. So let's move a little bit. You've mentioned in your conversations, I know that everything that was wrong about you ended up being your kind of redemption, right? Embracing those kind of aspects of yourself that others viewed as flaws really shaped who you are today. So can you talk a little bit about that? Because I think we don't all recognize that enough, right? I said it to a friend the other day who I know is struggling, and he's like, I feel like I've been through 15 lifetimes. I'm like, yes, but they made you who you are today, and we learn from them, we grow from them. So can you talk a little about that? Because I think you have some story there too.
Yeah, 15 lifetimes sounds familiar. I think people would always tell me growing up that I was an old soul. And I think that when you cram a lot of those experiences or complex trauma into early childhood, then you do develop, yes, a maturity, but looking back, then you realize, hey, I was just a kid, and that weight was too heavy. And so I think that often we don't get enough time to sit with that weight, or to have someone unpack it with us later, which just has been a beautiful journey of healing for me. So growing up, I felt like literally everything about me was wrong. My Blackness didn't match. I was a woman. I used to just wish that I was a boy. I saw them getting opportunities that I just thought, oh, I'll never have those. I was very, very poor. Later understood, okay, I was undiagnosed neurodivergent. I was chronically ill. I was overweight and shy and introverted, deeply sensitive, and I was anxious, all these things. And I felt really silenced and unprotected in all of those places. And so early on, I learned to hustle for my worthiness. And then I carried like this deep sense of obligation to prove that I even deserved to be alive. And I lived with that constant pressure, not from my mother, but from myself, that I needed to make up for the pain that I came from. And that is a really horrible weight to carry, to feel like you have to apologize for your existence and then to make up for pain that you didn't cause, or to make things right as a child in a way that you just can't make them right. And so all those experiences, I think, came together to inform my work now, that because I'm a woman, because I'm a person of color, because I understand ability and disability and illness and fat phobia and all these different things that I've experienced in my life, then I was able to help others embrace those parts of themselves that they felt like, hey, those things don't fit, or we don't talk about those things in polite company, and encourage them to see their experiences as a foundation that provided for me empathy and strength and authenticity. And then I've used that purpose to help me and to help me heal, and then also to help guide others to recognize that there is power within our stories, especially the things that we think are the throwaway things. And we can lead from a place of acceptance and a place of confidence that we were given that story with a purpose.
That's so important to pay attention to. And I'm, when I'm looking down, for those of you seeing us on video, it's because I'm taking notes because this is so wonderful, so inspiring, so motivating. Now, can you drop us into an example of what you're sharing, and particularly around internalizing maybe some of those messages, going back to the conversation around your coach, your basketball coach, who is giving you the most improved award and teaching you something. So teaching you to pay attention to growth over performance. So maybe, hey, external validation, measurements. Second, to what it means to be feeling a sense of, evolution and awakening to who you really are. Okay, so that all sounds really cool, right? But can you help us with some personal examples of what was it like to start shifting from seeking that external validation to experiencing more of internal confidence, but through something that was, specific moment that is, just yours?
Yeah, I think I have a lot of experience of proving myself wrong, like proving my own narrative wrong, and then kind of sitting there with, what do I do with that? If I'm a very logical person that's looking at the evidence, I've kind of proven my negative thinking wrong, or I've proven the limits I thought I had wrong. And so I found the industry of coaching and thought, oh, this is what I was made to do, was come alongside people, but ask these powerful questions. And there was a really transformative season where I actually ended up working for the coaching school that I went to. And I remember supporting the leaders there and getting to be around these dynamic, confident people and just thinking I could never be like them. And I was aspiring to potentially one day be an executive assistant. And I thought I could help someone else be so great in their passion and in their calling, and really thought that that was the limit. And so I thought of myself as an executive assistant, but I never imagined that one day I would be an executive, or that I would lead executives, that executives would come to me. And so really recognizing in them what I saw in me, I actually can ask powerful questions, or they shared pieces of their story and I have a story, I just haven't shared it. And then recognizing and discovering I had a talent for helping people get that clarity, or lasering in on what it is that they needed. And that was a really pivotal shift where I realized I could not just be a support, but I could also lead, and that my leadership could look like support. So again, I had proven myself wrong, and then had to wrestle with that understanding of, I thought I would always be the neck that turns the head. I always thought I would stay in the background as an introvert, and never thought that I might go out front with my story and my experiences to guide others. And I learned later, I felt drawn to leadership roles where I was providing spaces for the hard conversations that weren't happening in the status quo, the meeting after the meeting, where I could sense some people are not settled, or some people are needing more. That was the role I was playing, especially during crisis and a lack of surety, that I was able to come in and provide really a steadiness and a non-anxious presence. And so that experience shifted my focus from seeking the validation outside of what other people told me I could do. Often I was limited actually by my own imagination and the imagination of the leaders around me, who loved my support, but who didn't necessarily see that I could be more. and I didn't see it in myself. And so now I recognize if I see it in other people to stay and be in integrity, I have to see it in myself. I can't tell you that I see that potential in you and then not access it in me.
I love so many things that you said that I'm really going to have to go back and listen to this. But I love that because, I think even as women, right, you're a woman of color, but I think all women really struggle with that a lot. Like I know I did early in my career, but that confidence that you get from others and seeing it and being your authentic self. You used the word authentic a little while ago, and that is honestly one of my absolutely favorite words, right? I feel that we need to be who we are. That may not always fit the mold of what people think we should be, maybe, but right, being ourselves is really showing who we are, what we can do, what our capabilities are, how that works. I mean, is there something that stands out for you there? And you have two daughters, I think, right? I mean, are you teaching them those kind of things and teaching them to, be themselves? Because I think that's really hard in a lot of ways, especially in today's world. I think it was hard enough, I mean, I'm older than you, but I know it was hard when I was growing up. I know you had challenges when you were growing up, and now we teach that other generation how to do that. So that often feels different, right?
My daughters absolutely inspire me again to stay in integrity, that I can't teach them what I don't actually believe. And so it's been a huge moment for me to just walk in my motherhood and say, how do I want to do this really intentionally? And so I remember reading a book by an author. She was in a faith-based community. I think that often threw away a lot of gifts if they weren't the typical gifts you wanted to see. And one of the gifts that she named was humor. And she said, I realized that this is not a throwaway gift. And I recognized I was hiding and throwing away parts of me in my authenticity because they didn't fit within a corporate structure, right? It was very serious. And I am often finding the humor in things. It is very direct, and I'm often finding the way to influence versus command. And so I recognize I have a lot of gifts that I've been told or internalized were throwaway gifts that should not be thrown away. That is what makes up my authenticity, what makes me different. And so I try to pull that out of my children, not by naming it for them, but by giving it as a gift or as a question to them. So instead of saying, you're so theatrical, to say, you seem to really love to act things out. What are you interested in drama? Or, you just made that story come alive. And so I try to not, again, name it for someone so that it becomes a place where my girls can hustle for my attention or approval, but to say, what do you think? So anytime they bring me something, I say, how do you feel about what you did here? Tell me about it, not good job. And I think that exploration has actually allowed me to be really empathetic to, I worked really hard on this part, Mom, or I tried really hard at this. And then again, back to that story of that coach that I had, being able to talk about their improvement and their growth, not just their achievement. So absolutely that intersects with my motherhood, with my womanhood, but also with how I do my work, is that I'm often looking at whatever happens and saying, we're telling ourselves a story about that. Tell me the story you're telling about that. Does that story fit the narrative that you want to have for the rest of your life? Is there a place maybe you're being invited to prove yourself wrong with that story and the facts that we think that we have when we're looking at what just happened? And I love getting to explore that because there's so much growth that happens there. And there's so much transformation that happens there when someone can gently push and challenge to say, I see something in you, but I can't just speak it over you. I want to actually bring it out of you and provide safety for that to happen.
Yeah, we have to explore our own, like we all have our own thing, but we have to sometimes figure that out for ourselves, right? And so I love how you do that with your daughters. So even I'm sure you have something to say before we ask before we ask Jessica our final question, but this has been an amazing conversation for me.
So amazing. I am reminiscing about a time when I would watch my son when he was little. Um, and entertain the room, right? And I'm thinking back on the beautiful and poignant comments you made about humor. I saw him as a little kid. He wasn't necessarily consciously choosing to use humor and goof off to bring in levity into a room full of density. So that would be what that means is like there's some kind of a family gathering. Everybody has their happy face on. Let's say it's the holidays, and they're all like, haha, love you. I love you too. But that's not really the energy in the room. The energy in the room is that there's some unresolved tension. There's
Yes.
something going on where there is a lot of stress in the space. And then I watched him just naturally try to intervene. And, with his toddler energy or his little boy energy and just monkey around, goof off, and essentially attempt to raise everybody's, experience. And there were two or three different ways in which I witnessed him do that. One was where he was essentially giving himself up in the process. He
Mm,
was basically coming in and kind of, I could see already taking on, there must be something that I'm doing or not doing
yeah.
that is causing these grown-ups to be so stressed out. And that couldn't have been further from the truth, but you can just see that, false belief thinking that kids start to absorb from the environment until and unless someone shows up and starts interrupting that, and helping them learn that that's not the case. So I saw the expression of that like humor from a place of him basically caretaking everybody in the room, trying to like, come on, you all. Now, simultaneously, that's really his true nature. He's got in him this like leadership quality of like, you can do it. That leader who can serve and support, like what you were talking about. And he does that with humor and levity. And it is a tool that comes through him naturally. So you just, you just spoke about something that is, for me, so personal, but I think you're also bringing up something so important to pay attention to, generally speaking, because, you're not talking about self-deprecating humor. You're not talking about, sarcasm, but you are talking about levity. And, what a joy to have you on the show and, demo that. You brought up so many difficult subjects with levity.
Mm.
Thank you.
Thank you for sharing about your son as well. And I think every one of our gifts can have that shadow side. And I definitely think that that was what I thought was authenticity, making fun of myself only, or the deprecation, and then realizing I actually don't need to do that. I can make fun of the situation or these different things in a way that brings a light. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, for sure. Okay. So in summary, all these big life events that we've talked about, these pivots, right? How are they a step forward? Can you talk just a little about that before we end?
So every experience I shared from my conception or the bus incident or the coach, I think that we all can kind of have those touch points throughout our lives. And I think that now I realize that they are all experiences that have shaped me and taught me resilience and, again, empathy for other people, and just have created in me a deep commitment to creating space that other people can grow and have reactions and responses that allow us, even from our trauma, to grow from that versus be stunted by those experiences. And so through my work in higher education and with nonprofits and with my business, I feel like the calling to work with executives, with CEOs, with the leaders who are in charge really of their organization's experience in so many ways. They're all chief culture officers, that they're setting the culture, that when I can help them safely explore their own self-awareness and what's happening, implement practices that work for everyone, support genuine growth and healing in them and their organization so that everyone gets the experience and the benefit of that resilience, push into difficult conversations, then that's where I really feel people who feel supported in these real lasting ways produce the best outcomes for their missions and for their companies. And so I really do think that that is a way that we can be wildly competitive and successful, but also go home and sleep at night and be full, whole human people. And so my journey has taught me that that healing is possible, even from some of the darkest, deepest pains, and that growth is possible. And I've dedicated my life to walking with leaders as they want to do that growth and healing. And I think that as we together, because I'm still in process on that, find our resilience, we also find our sense of purpose.
Yeah, no, I love that. And I always say, as a leader, if you're a good leader, those difficult conversations are the hardest, but they're the most important, right? Us having those conversations and having open, honest conversation is so hard, sometimes, but it's really important. So thank you so much, Jessica, for being here today. It was a wonderful conversation. We really appreciate you being on this episode of Step into the Pivot.
Thank you so much.
So much gratitude for you, Jessica. And sorry to be in stereo with that gratitude for you.
Absolutely.
And talking over. It's just that my heart is really overflowing with, feeling so good and so light, inspired by this conversation.
Thank you for giving me space to share my story.
Absolutely. All right, everybody, this ends this week's episode. And remember, if you have a pivot, step into it.